Well, good afternoon on a on a Wednesday afternoon here on the East Coast, and I think we have participants from around the country. So wherever you are, thank you for being here. And on behalf of the Infinite Hero Foundation, I'm Louis Runnion, and I'll be the moderator for today's panel. And I'll introduce that panel in just a moment. But our host today is the Infinite Hero Foundation, and a little bit about Infinite Hero, if you don't know about them, is that we exist to connect our military veterans and military families with innovative and effective treatment programs for service-related injuries. And Infinite Hero is committed to combining the most difficult frontline issues, mental and physical, facing military veterans and their families today. They do that through really 5 pillars: the physical rehabilitation, leadership development, brain health, family support, and suicide prevention. It happens to be Suicide Prevention Month, and so we thought this would be a timely opportunity to talk about something that's important to both me and Kyle and Lisa, who's our panelist today. So without further ado, please let me introduce our panelists. First of all, Dr. Lisa Berman. Lisa is the medical director for MindWorks, which is our partner. Dr. Berman is a MD in psychiatric medicine and a graduate of Cornell University medical school, and she completed her psychoanalytic training at Columbia. She has a clinical expertise in a broad range of conditions, including depressive and mood disorders, as well as panic disorders. Lisa approaches her mental health treatment plan with all of her clients with the belief that each person can have a unique path to a more balanced and resilient and fulfilling life. My other panelist is my business partner and friend, Kyle White. Kyle is a veteran of the United States Army and was awarded the Medal of Honor for actions on the 9th of November, 2007. When Kyle and I first met, we really built a relationship around what we can do to improve mental health and mental wellness of service members and veterans and their families. It's important to us. We founded our company. We've made it a pillar in what we do and how we give back to our community. Kyle's a graduate with a business degree from Charlotte, the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, and is co-founder of 1109, which is the company that we founded. We can talk a little bit more about the company a little bit later. Today, specifically, you're going to learn a couple of objectives here. And so, first of all, this presentation, we hope, will underscore that you'll gain a day-to-day understanding of the activities and how they impact your mental wellness. And it's not just one piece of it. It's just not a moment in time that impact how we live our best life, if you will. And so with that, it's these small decisions that contribute to our wellness. And so what are our habits and routines, and how do we contribute to the overall that contribute to our overall mental state? Lisa, if you wouldn't mind, take a moment and talk. How would you describe everyday mental wellness? And then as we move forward today in this conversation, how can we in our learning process be mindful of what that objective is?
Thanks, Louis. So everyday mental wellness is an approach that we have at MindWorks to your daily mental self-care. We think and hear all the time about what we can do to live a healthier lifestyle for our physical bodies. But, we don't often think about what's a healthy lifestyle for your mental well-being. And so with the idea of everyday mental wellness, we're taking the idea that there are just small decisions and choices you're constantly making that can have either a positive or negative impact on your mental health. And we focus on 4 main areas. There are a lot of things that contribute to mental health that are in your everyday life, but we focus on 4, and that's sleep, nutrition, exercise, and stress management. And the idea of everyday mental wellness is that you want to have a routine that you know is going to maximize your mental well-being.
Yeah, Lisa, I think to add to that is that we often hear, and particularly since what's happened globally in the past 3 or 4 weeks, there's always a focus on, if you're in crisis mode, here's a number to call, and we're certainly advocates of that. But what we'd like to cover today is really how do we avoid that crisis part, and it doesn't have to be a trigger, which is maybe what I think a lot of people are alluding to today, which happened in Afghanistan. But how can I every day improve my mental health, my mental wellness? That's what we hope to accomplish today. So there are important factors in everyday mental wellness. I'm going to go through these very slowly, and we're going to go in detail with a few of these, but we'll cover a top level on some of them. So first of all, it's how much we sleep, and then what we eat, exercise, stress management, work-life balance, social media and screens, social supports, and substance abuse. Lisa, we're going to go into detail into nutrition and work-life balance, stress management and exercise. But I think there's some important things here that we're not going to have time to go through today. And the first one that I like to really talk about is, some of those bottom three that are listed here: the social media, work-life, social sports, substance abuse. Let's talk a little bit about that. Can you define what a good work-life balance is going to be, and is this an ever-changing objective for us?
Yeah. So the idea of a work-life balance is that you want to strive to have a successful work life and a fulfilling life outside of work. And often, when people are talking about work-life balance, the implication is that you're working too much and that you need to cut back. But really what we're saying is that you need to have both in order to have a fulfilling and well-rounded life. And in fact, if you can take a step back from work and spend some time doing the things that you enjoy, being with the people you love, your work quality is probably going to actually improve rather than if it's just work, 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 work. So, having a good work-life balance does not mean that your work productivity has to suffer, which is, I think, often what people think of when they're told they don't have a good work-life balance. They probably think that they need to back off of work. It's not really that. It's just that you need to have a counterbalance to it. And you need to have things in your life other than work. And some of the indicators that you might have a problem in this area is if people are telling you, you work all the time, if you're bringing your work home and bringing your work on vacation, you never really take a full vacation, or what do you do in your downtime? Is it hard for you to find things to do when you're not at work? A real telltale sign, in my opinion, is people who, when they do have downtime, they get a little anxious. They don't know what to do with themselves because they're just not used to it. And they really use work to just fill in all the empty spaces in their life. And how, it's not going to lead to you being able to do your best possible work.
Yeah, Kyle, you're an entrepreneur. And so you're also the father of 2 young children and a third pending. How do you manage? What are strategies that you manage for your work-life balance?
Yeah, thanks, Lewis. And it's tough. I mean, there are challenges, sometimes on a daily basis, and especially in the environment that we all find ourselves in for the past, since last March, really, where we're at home. Our families are all under the same roof during our work days, on the weekends, really 24/7. And so it's a challenge to be able to find, that time and be able to separate, work from home life or from your hobbies or whatever they may be when they all take place under the same roof. And so for me, one of the things that it took a while to perfect, obviously it's still challenging on some days, but, just, worrying so much about, in this specific environment, I have to sit down at my desk from 8 to 5 or whatever your work hours may be. and just focus on the things that you know you need to get done, things you'd like to get done, and really knock that out, and don't so much worry about the order of things. And it's okay to, like you said, Lisa, take a step away, go take care of something else, and maybe go have lunch and then come back and continue working. But it's a strategy. There's distractions, there's things that can derail your day, but that's what I've really learned is don't sweat the small stuff. If you get interrupted, whatever that may be, it's just end of the day, did I meet my objectives? Did I accomplish what I wanted to? And that helps me personally.
Lisa, social media, I think we all live, not all of us, but a lot of folks live attached to their phone, or they're looking at Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or whatever it happens to be. And that can have a positive influence, but it also can have a very negative influence on our mental wellness. You care to comment on that?
Yeah. So it's true. We read so much about the negative effects of social media. And I'm not going to discount that, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but I do also want to say that it's not all bad. And in fact, where would we have been during COVID without any social media? It's allowed us to really stay connected in ways that we couldn't otherwise. But the downside is that it is an area that's kind of very ripe for addiction. The things that tend to cause addiction are things that give an unpredictable positive response, and the classic example of that is gambling. And social media is the same. You don't know when you're going to get that positive response, that burst of dopamine, and so that keeps us coming back. But there is, unfortunately, a strong correlation between heavy social media use and an increased risk of depression. And we can see that social media and screens in general can cause delayed sleep, can cause anxiety, loneliness, and even, like, at its worst, suicidal thoughts. I think of it as sort of two segments of social media. There's the Facebooks and Instagrams, and those are ways that people tend to fall into this pattern of comparing themselves and feeling inadequate. And then there's Twitter and those kinds of things where one of the downsides there is just the aggression and hostility. And when it's so far removed from an actual person, it's much easier for someone to just let out some hostility, which is obviously not good to be on the receiving end of. And I think that at the end of the day, you just have to ask yourself, does your social media use make you feel good, or does it make you feel bad? What positive things does it contribute to your life? And maybe there are some, maybe that's how you stay in touch with your college friends, or your grandchildren. But is it making you feel bad every time you go on Facebook and see so-and-so's beautiful house and perfect children? And that in that case, if it's making you feel worse, bad more often than good, it's time to reconsider how you're using it.
Yeah, Kyle, you're an influencer on social media. How do you manage your account? I know people come at you with different opinions sometimes, but how do you manage the process?
Yeah, well, you talk about the management aspect, but then I'm also a consumer of social media myself. I like to go in and look at the things that I'm interested in. And so, really I'd approach that from two spots. As somebody who, likes to share their thoughts and opinions on, as a recipient, on the areas that, I'm passionate about supporting, especially within the veteran community. It's sometimes a time consuming task, and it's something you have to be very, very careful about, how you approach subjects, especially when they're sensitive, like suicide prevention and mental health, where, a lot of people are not comfortable having those conversations. And so it's, how do you create the right messaging? How do you get your point across without, making sure anybody takes it the wrong way? And that's, something that can be mentally fatiguing. I'd like to classify that as, but, it's an excellent tool to, start conversations and things of that nature. But then on a consumer side, when I'm looking at the things I enjoy and stuff like that, I mean, I definitely can, relate to especially what Lisa was just saying, as far as, how is this making me feel? Like, is this, making me feel better? And like, is this a nice distraction for the rest of the day or for this moment? Or does this make you feel better or worse? Like the news cycle, depending on what the coverage is, especially the most recent example, Afghanistan withdrawal. There's a lot of, a lot of emotions surrounding that subject, especially if you served or a Gold Star family member for one of the people that are killed in action. And so it's, weighing that balance, how much is too much and how is this making me feel? Is it time to take a step away? And I definitely have both aspects of that. There's times where I enjoy it and times where I'm like, I gotta delete this thing for a while.
Yeah, I know, I've gotten into the habit, if I read an article, then I would go see who disagreed with me in the comments, right? Who disagreed with the article, or how silly it is. And then I found out that was just kind of eating me up, and I just stopped reading the comments, right? So
that's where people go to pick fights.
Yeah, exactly. We could do a whole hour on substance abuse, and I don't want to dive off into that right now because I don't think we would do it justice. Lisa, quickly go over social supports with just kind of a 10,000-foot view of social supports and how we can use them in a positive or negative way.
Yeah. Social supports are the relationships that build us up, that contribute positively to our well-being, and positive social supports are correlated with improved health, reduced stress, improved mental health. But sometimes these relationships can create more stress than they relieve. If there's hostility, or if it's a toxic relationship, someone who doesn't want the best for you, there's jealousy, then reconsider that relationship. Kind of like with the social media, use your inner barometer. How is this relationship making you feel? Is it making you feel good, or is it making you feel bad? And of course, things aren't black and white, and there's more gray than anything else. But if a relationship is consistently making you feel bad, again, it's time to rethink that relationship.
Thank you. So how are you doing with your mental routine? We're going to take a look at that. And we're going to start out the relationship between sleep and mental health, and how that goes in both directions. This is an interesting picture. I think all of us who served probably have some derivative of, if there's a corner, I can find a spot real quick, I'll get some sleep. And so I think that's what this particular picture depicts here. And this happens to be Kyle's 173rd, the unit that Kyle served in. And one of the things that we brag about in the military is our ability to operate on the lack of sleep or lack of quality of sleep. But Lisa, can you take us through the relationships that exist between sleep and mental wellness and how it affects our anxiety and stress?
Yeah, of course. So contrary to popular belief, the vast majority of adults need 7 to 9 hours of sleep for optimal health and well-being. And that's not to say that you can't get by on less, and many, many, many people do, but you're not going to be functioning at your best. So everyone in this picture, I'm fairly sure, is sleep deprived, because it's not normal to sleep on the floor and in those conditions. And if you can fall asleep anywhere, then you're not getting enough sleep at night. To be well rested, everybody needs 5 or 6 90-minute sleep cycles. So, going through the whole all the phases of sleep, including REM. And about 1 in 3 adults don't get this. And when you don't get enough sleep, you are at a significantly increased risk of a lot of health complications, including obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, and stroke, and also depression. A lot of us want to believe that we need less sleep and want to believe that we can train our bodies to need less sleep. You're not training your body to need less sleep. You're just getting used to the effects of chronic sleep deprivation. So in order to really function at your best, you do need at least those 7 hours, most people 7.5 hours.
Yeah, Kyle, we both in our military career experienced plenty of sleep deprivation, but what we're really talking about is post-military. You have instances now where you experience sleep deprivation just through day-to-day activities. Talk a little bit about that. I think Kyle froze. He might have lost his internet for a second. So being a young parent, Kyle oftentimes is awake in the middle of the night with kids, and you know, it can impact our decision. Here he's back. You're on mute.
Yeah, I apologize. We have storms moving through and must have jarred the internet there, so I apologize.
The question pitched to you was sleep deprivation after the military.
Yeah, it's so, and Lisa, you know, getting used to those long-term effects, or I guess getting used to the effects of sleep deprivation over a long period of time is something I carried through actually all the way until I'd say 12 months ago. I think 2 kids kind of, you know, helped you realize you need a little more sleep. But I was of the mindset where, hey, go to bed at 11, wake up at 4, like, let's go, let's get to the gym, get going with the day. Caffeine gets me through. But, you know, as you learn, and I guess once I started sleeping more consistently for that longer period of time, you understand just how much better you feel at the end of the day, you know, when you are fully rested. And so that is something it's ingrained to you from military culture. I mean, that's just what you do. But that picture, for example, I know exactly what they're doing up in Italy. You know, they got up at, you know, 02:30 to go draw parachutes at 7 and then sit there for 10 hours until, you know, you get the go or no go for your jump. And so, you know, but that's the lifestyle. And so it's very important to understand, you know, just like you were saying, for that complete, you know, wellness picture, how much sleep does play a factor into that.
That's a good segue, Lisa, to some signs that you're not getting enough sleep. Can you give us some examples of the signs and how they might manifest themselves in day-to-day activities?
Yeah, I mean, all of those things listed right there, these are all the classic signs. You're going to feel tired. You might even, you know, spontaneously fall asleep when you don't mean to. Your mood is going to be irritable. You're going to have a short fuse. You may, you know, sort of just get into more fights with your spouse or partner, your kids. You're going to be less productive at work or in any endeavors. You're going to have trouble concentrating. Your judgment is going to be off. You're not going to be able to make the best decisions that you would make if you were fully rested. And if you know, a good test is if you cut out all your caffeine and you can't get through the day, you know, without really struggling, you're not getting enough sleep. And another symptom that's sort of underappreciated of not getting enough sleep is it increases your appetite. So that's also just a telltale sign.
Yeah, we'll get into nutrition in a minute because I find myself awake at 2 a.m. eating things that probably are not healthy for me. Kyle, what do you do is there a trigger that you realize that, okay, I'm getting some lack of sleep now? Is there something that happens that you go, okay, I need to get more rest?
Well, you know, I can think of times even over the last just few months, dealing with moves and, you know, another kid on the way, where I know times where I've had every single one of those things on the screen. And it's mostly, you know, the people around me, just like, you know, back in when I returned from Afghanistan, it was the people around me noticed the change within myself that, you know, I needed to get help for post-traumatic stress. But it's the people around me now. They're like, hey, you need to go to bed, like go get some rest. And so, but it is like all those things. It's, man, I need that extra cup of coffee or, you know, whatever it may be. But just understanding that I feel off, like I'm not producing what I need to today, and then, you know, making some corrective behaviors. But it's a tough cycle to break. But once you do, you understand more on the days that you feel bad and what, you know, the contributing factor is versus constantly being sleep deprived.
Yeah, I think there used to be kind of a cool factor. How long can you stay awake in the Army? But the reality is that probably did us more damage than good.
Mm-hmm.
Are you getting enough sleep? Let's assess. So how do you fall asleep? How many hours do you sleep? Do you have a consistent bedtime and waking time? That's something I've implemented recently that's worked well. And then how's your quality of sleep? Lisa, I want to talk about that for a minute. Waking up in the middle of the night with something on your mind. You probably went to bed with it on your mind. It's either work related or maybe it's relationship related. Give us some ideas to how to work through that.
Yeah, so there's some strategies that you can use. Often when we wake up and can't get back to sleep, it is because something's just running through our mind and we can't shut it off. And sometimes it feels like you almost don't want to shut it off because you're worried you might forget it. So one strategy I like to recommend is to write it down. There it is. It can leave your brain safely, and there it is on your notepad. Another strategy would be breathing exercises to just do slow, deep breathing from your diaphragm as opposed to your rib cage. So your belly is going to expand, and you can even put your hand on your belly and feel it expand. And you're just going to want to breathe in slowly for a count of 4 through your nose, and then hold it for a count of 7. And then breathe out slowly through your mouth for a count of 8. And we call that 4-7-8 breathing. And that relaxes your fight or flight response. So hopefully, you can sort of just let the drowsiness take over.
Thanks for those. Let's move on to the next pillar, and that's food and nutrition. I think a lot of people, I never knew this in the Army, never thought about it, nutrition affecting my mental wellness. I ate what I wanted to eat, what I could get my hands on, basically. But Lisa, how can food and nutrition impact our overall mental wellness?
Yeah, so just like your physical health, of course, it's going to impact your mental health. These things we're seeing more and more are just intimately connected, the physical and mental health. So if you think about it, like the fuel that you use for your body is also fueling your brain. And are you going to use high quality fuel or low quality fuel? And by low quality fuel, I mean, processed food, fast food, chips, candy, all that stuff, you know it when you see it. Whole foods are foods that you know where they came from. They're not overly processed. If you look at your food, does it look like where it came from, or does it look like, it's been manufactured by a machine? And if you can't really recognize where it came from, it's probably full of chemicals, full of just who knows what, that's not going to have a good impact on your mental wellness. How does your body feel? How does your mind feel after you have a Big Mac? Probably you're not going to do your best thinking after that. How do you feel after you have a healthy meal? Is that more, sort of nourishing to your body and your mind? Another consideration for food and nutrition and how it relates to mental well-being is inflammation. We're hearing a lot about inflammation now, and we now know that we have increased inflammation in our brains when we're depressed or anxious. And the foods that are going to cause inflammation are different for everybody. And if you're interested in figuring that out for yourself, you can speak to a nutrition coach. But the likely suspects are gluten, dairy, soy, eggs, things like that. But again, different for everybody. And then the things that are going to create inflammation in everybody are things like sugar and alcohol, pesticides, food additives. And on the other side, the healthier foods are things that are high in antioxidants and nutrients that can help clear toxins and waste that can cause damage. So, if you just sort of take that analogy of thinking of it as fuel, do you want to use the high quality fuel, or are you going to use the junk fuel? And there it is.
Yeah, perfect segue. For the veterans that are out there, you've probably seen this. Kyle, you want to explain the picture here?
Yeah, and so first, Lisa, and so if I can make Reese's peanut butter cups grow on a tree, I'm good to go. So.
I do love them too, Kyle.
I can't kick those. I don't care what it says. I can't kick those. But so when you're deployed, at least at my time, 2007, 2008, largely your meals were MREs, and the rare hot meal you did get, often wasn't that great. But at the main bases, where you fly in and out for leave or deployment, redeployment, which means leaving or returning to the war zone, there'd be Burger King there, and that was always the hot spot, because that's, it's different. It's got a little, Mideast feel to it, but it's still, better than an MRE, and so it's interesting to have that the first time.
The irony is an MRE has a half-life, right? So so no preservatives in there. It's all healthy for you.
Exactly.
And the thing about fast food is that it tastes really good. It's made to taste really good, So of course you want to eat that, but it tastes that way because of the chemicals, not because of the nutritional value.
Absolutely.
Lisa, you talk about the GI tract as a second brain. Can you explain that?
Yeah. So we actually have something on the order of 100 million neurons in the walls of our intestines. And there's two-way communication between the GI tract and the brain, and we call this the gut-brain axis. And in fact, both the gut and the brain have the same receptors for the same neurotransmitters, for serotonin, norepinephrine, dopamine, those kinds of things. And both are affected by stress hormones like cortisol. So when we think about the gut-brain axis, we think about, how our emotions affect our gut, how our gut affects our emotions. And anyone who has IBS can confirm that there's a very close linkage between your feelings and your GI tract. When we think about something that we're nervous about, we feel butterflies in our stomach, or when we feel a certain way about something, but we don't know why, we call it a gut feeling. Or when you're grieving or depressed, you lose your appetite, or when you want to feel better, maybe you have some comfort food. So, there's this very clear connection between the gut and the brain, and they're kind of run by the same molecules.
And so then let's talk about just a moment, thinking about food as fuel in getting up in the morning and how I want my day to progress and what I have to do. Lisa, can you talk about strategies, how to eat more mindfully? And we're not talking about getting a nutritionist, but maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So being mindful is really all about just tuning into your senses and being present. So, if you're sitting in front of the TV with a bag of chips and you're just putting the chips in your mouth without thinking about it, that's kind of the opposite of eating mindfully. But if you're, actually taking the time to taste your food and to think about it, that's mindful eating. And my husband loves to tell this story about a book that he read that compares the sort of business diners who are wolfing down the scallop special and not paying attention to just how special it is, compared to the author of this story, who's slicing it thinly and enjoying every bite and every sensation, the texture of it, the taste of it, the smell of it. That's kind of the epitome of eating mindfully.
Well, I hope, I try and think about it. Processed sugar was something else that we talked about, white sugar versus some of the natural sweeteners and how that can impact your cognitive abilities as well as inflammation. But let's talk about something that goes hand in hand with nutrition, and that's exercise. How often have we seen, Kyle, someone who's fit in the military, and you see him 5 or 6 years later, and you found out the military was just the scaffolding that held up, someone who didn't really want to exercise. And so there's a couple reasons, the military has exercise as part of the requirements, and one is obviously, the mission at hand, but it's the overall wellness as well. So, how do we see those physical fitness requirements translate into our day-to-day life? Lisa, from your perspective, how does that impact my overall mental wellness and productivity?
Yeah, so there's a direct correlation. Exercise directly improves your mental health by decreasing anxiety and depression and stress and low mood, and boosting self-esteem and concentration and memory, increases blood flow to the brain. It can be used as a positive coping strategy. It improves sleep, which we've already talked about how important that is, and it helps us feel productive. Studies have actually shown that the effects of exercise are comparable to an antidepressant.
Yeah, I mean, I know when I really want to solve a problem, I get on my bike and ride, and that exercise, I always come back refreshed and, you know, ready to take on the next challenge. Kyle, you talk about, you know, you've included exercise in your day-to-day weekly activities. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we talked about, and we've mentioned earlier in the presentation that, you know, the things that, you know, we learn from our lives in the military, or, you know, just our life in general, that we carry on is more of a habit or routine than anything else. And for me, you know, waking up, you know, doing some sort of physical training in the morning, that was just, you know, what set me up good for the day. And it's been interesting for me personally, seeing a difference in, you know, my productivity, my mood, you know, how I handle just daily life when I miss those opportunities to work out. So, you know, we talked a little bit about, you know, maintaining that work-life balance. You know, for me personally, in the, you know, past 90 days or so, it's been really hard just living with my mother-in-law and, you know, sharing 2 rooms for a whole family. You know, it's difficult to make sure you have that time to get the workout, but, you know, what I really try to do is ensure I'm able to do some sort of physical activity. It doesn't have to be the thing I would love to go spend an hour and a half doing, but ensuring I just get up and get active. I mean, it really helps me stay in the right mindset for, you know, whatever comes up, family, work. I know if, you know, customer has a new request that needs immediate turnaround, it's a lot easier if I'm already in my right mental state, you know, where I feel good, and confident enough to take on the day.
Yeah, I find I travel a lot, and even if, you know, just getting out and walking for half an hour is helpful. It's not maybe ideal, but it's helpful to do that and alleviate or reduce some of that stress, which is a great segue to the next section, and that's stress. This is an interesting picture, because this picture was taken on the 9th of November 2007, and it was just a few minutes, Kyle, before you were ambushed. And what happened, the hours ensuing after that, I can't imagine, you know, more stress. And we've talked about this and the palpability of the stress on that day, and that lasted for hours. But the reality is, you know, you still have stress, and you can say that there's never as much stress as there was on that particular day. But the impacts may be the same, right? And so, Lisa, we talk about stress, and they come in many different forms. Can you give us some examples of what you see as common stressors and associated symptoms? And then, you know, how can stress be positive for us?
So, you know, I think of stress as, you know, capital S stress and lowercase s stress. And, you know, the big ones are, you know, death of a loved one, divorce, job loss, illness or injury, trauma, but also getting married, moving, Kyle, as you can attest to. These, you know, create the same amount of stress in our body as, you know, these terrible things. But then there are also the everyday stressors, the work-related stress, the deadlines, the heavy workload, maybe the lack of support at work, the everyday worries, fear and uncertainty, you know, anxiety about upcoming changes, financial anxiety. These stressors differ for everybody. You know, what may cause stress in one person may not cause stress at all in another person. And in fact, Lewis, as you point out, some stress actually can be beneficial. You know, it's kind of a bell-shaped curve. A little bit of stress can make us more focused and more productive, but then too much stress overloads us and floods us, and we lose our productivity and concentration, and just ability to function. And what can happen if you think about it this way, from a sort of evolutionary perspective, a little bit of stress is designed to get your body going, to protect itself, to sort of, you know, flee the predator. So it activates that fight or flight response, which can be very beneficial. But too much of that, and, you know, then you're, you know, let's just kind of continue the analogy. You're running too fast to get away from the predator that you're tripping, right? And then that's game over. It's kind of the same thing when it comes to stress now. A little bit can help you meet that deadline. But if the deadline is just too overwhelming, then all you can think about is that the fact that you're not going to meet that deadline. And so, you know, you may have difficulty thinking about anything else, difficulty concentrating, and some decreased productivity, and some physical symptoms alongside that, like, you know, upset stomach, headache, fatigue.
Yeah, Kyle, I can't imagine, and I think most people probably couldn't imagine the stress of 40 people trying to kill you all at one time for a couple of hours. But you have day-to-day stress now, and I think you'll say that there's some cumulative effects that are very equal. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, thank you, Lewis. And I was actually, thinking about this while Lisa was speaking, and the stress of that day was obviously significant, but in a way, there's a way to mitigate it. You're very task oriented. It's, hey, I have to help my buddy over here, or I have to put the radio in operation over here. Like, these are the sets of tasks I need to accomplish to get, hopefully get through this. Life and just work and family and just everything removed from the military, it's almost even more stressful because you have to think about things more on a long-term scale. So it's like, hey, we're trying to chase this opportunity as a company. These are the things we have to do to get there. And I could probably stay up for days if I really focused in on everything I want us to do as a company, and things we want to do as a family. And I'll do that, but I luckily have a bedtime routine that helps me get that in order. But it's just a different type of stress, and it's all about the same same concept of how can I control it, can I mitigate it. So stress, like you said, Lisa, certain levels okay, but when you cross into that threshold of how much is too much, then you got to do something to take care of that.
Yeah, Lisa, do you want to talk about how it affects our health, stress?
Yeah, unchecked stress is a huge risk factor for all kinds of physical illness, things I mentioned before that are also you're at increased risk for with sleep deprivation, like, diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, stroke, those things. Certainly anxiety disorders. And, when your body is in this sustained fight or flight response, and, you're increasing cortisol, your organs are not designed to withstand constant exposure to cortisol. So it takes a toll on the organs, whether that's, your kidneys or your brain or anything else.
So we will ask you to, think about positive coping skills and negative coping skills. Look at your own stress. Lisa, you've covered mindfulness and breathing, and, going for a walk, calling a friend. Some negative things are substance abuse and denial avoidance. Talk to us a little bit about, recognizing some of those negative things before they become problematic.
So, like many of the things I've talked about today, you want to tune into your inner barometer and just be present with yourself, and kind of just take stock of whether something feels good or bad. Interests and hobbies are great, but they can cross the line and turn into an obsession where they become unhealthy. So listen to the people around you. If they're saying all you ever think about is fishing, maybe it's time to really.
Just kidding. Go ahead.
Didn't realize I touched a nerve there. Yeah, then, it might be time to think about, well, maybe this has crossed over into an obsession. So, it's like everything else, you want to find balance, and you want to pay attention to how it makes you feel in the end. And, hobbies are good. They do so much for us. They are outlets for stress. They are coping strategies. They can be social, or it can be alone time, but again, you just have to pay attention to, is this something that's helping you or hurting you?
Yeah, I think, one of the big negative things for me is traffic, right? So being in traffic and then you find out that you get stressed and there's a lot of negative things happen there. So find different ways to commute or commute at different times of the day, whatever the case is. You come home a happier person. There are some less obvious contributors here. And as you can see, my friend in the sunlight, getting sunlight, we didn't cover these, but I wanted to just kind of wrap up with this before we move on to the final phase. But Lisa, the less obvious contributors, the quality of sleep. But we talked earlier on about mindfulness versus disconnectedness. Am I present at the meal, or am I, texting and looking off somewhere? That happens to all of us at some point, but there becomes a point where it becomes problematic, right? Structure versus structured routine. I think this is something that Kyle and I grew up with, at an early age, and in the military. Is the easiest days of my life were probably basic training, where I was told when to wake up, what to eat, what to wear, what to do, when to eat again, what to do, what to wear, when to go to bed, and wake up and repeat the next day. Basically, no thought process. So that routine versus the chaos of which I think we as a lot of military folks experience when you leave the military, in that structure and routine. Like, okay, well, here now you're out. No one's telling me what to do anymore. That oftentimes is more problematic than having the structure and routine. Lisa, you want to talk about anything particular on this slide?
Yeah, so I mean, you're right about that structure and routine. And I think, so many people struggled with this in the beginning of the pandemic, when suddenly our routines were disrupted and people just, were at loose ends and didn't really know what to do with all of this new free time. And you kind of had to work to create a structure and a routine for yourself. And that's very much, behind the principle of this everyday mental wellness routine, is that if you know what you're supposed to do, it's easier to do it. If you kind of just have this vague sense of, oh, I should probably exercise maybe 3 times this week, then you're much less likely to do it. So structure and routine are key for so many people to optimal mental wellness. Additionally, I'll comment on sunlight, which is, sunlight actually stimulates serotonin production. Serotonin is the neurotransmitter that we don't have enough of when we're depressed and anxious. Sunlight also helps with vitamin D metabolism, so to convert vitamin D into its active form. Vitamin D is also critical to help prevent depression, and critical for so many other processes in our body. And also it just feels good.
Yeah. Kyle, I want to come back to you for one final question. Mindfulness and disconnectedness. Do you find that happens to you? Does it happen at home? Does it happen at work? Does it, in your personal time? And if so, how do you recognize it and how do you correct it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I've read quite a few books on mindfulness. Something I really enjoy. Well, at least understanding how it can affect me, and then recognizing it, in the moment when I'm not living really in the now, or practicing mindfulness actively. So I have a terrible habit of, worrying about what's happening next week or 2 months or, 6 months ahead, and the things I have to do, and always wanting to get to that spot or get to that next, goalpost, or get to that vacation, whatever it may be. But when I get in that routine and I'm able to recognize it, it's sitting down, it's, going outside and grounding yourself. And you guys can look that up. But, we mentioned a little bit about those ways to, minimize stress and what we do to correct ourselves, or get ourselves back on the right path. And for me, there's a little anecdote, but I have this 10-minute YouTube video I always watch, and it's a mix of breathing exercises and things like that. And it always just kind of brings me back to the now. And that's what helps me practice actively, if you will.
Yeah, but as I wrap things up here, thanks for sharing that, Kyle. As we wrap things up today, we use this particular image to say that, it's not, there's not a singular thing I can do, but it's many things that I should try and focus on. If I start to fall off in sleep, how do I address that? How's that impacting my nutrition? What about my exercise? Where's stress? Where's stress fall into this? So think of this in small digestible pieces. And then, where are our short-term goals versus our long-term goals, and how do we impact those? You guys have all seen probably the guy with the sign who holds up, the obvious things, like don't drive in the bike lane signs. So there's a veteran version of that. And I want to wrap up today before we start taking questions with a little bit of humor, but then, some seriousness as well. So the upper left-hand side is not all who wander are lost except the lieutenant. So, in our military world, the lieutenants are always lost. They can never find themselves on the map. And then the second guy here is an officer. Lieutenants are officers, and my friend with the bow tie says, officers are people too. So basically, don't pick on me. So a little bit of humor there. And then we often talk about barracks lawyers or barracks medical people. The point here with this particular sign is, barracks mental wellness stuff's probably not the best option to choose. So Kyle's laughing about that. How many stories have we heard in the barracks? Oh man, if you do this, you'll take this, it'll make you feel better. Do that, and it's probably seeking that professional help is important. You don't have to be a veteran to help. Meaning that in our world, I think a lot of times people are afraid to talk to us because, well, I didn't serve, I'm not a veteran. The reality is we all face these similar problems. Competency complacency kills. Not wanting to do something about this is what I want to drive home here. Is don't be complacent about this. Recognize what those triggers are. Lisa, I'll ask you to comment about this in a moment, but I think it's an ongoing thing for us. And if I'm not constantly aware of what's impacting me, for a day or 2 days, then I fall into kind of a bad cycle. And then the last one is, we tend to focus on society. Social media tends to focus on the 22 a day, suicide, that sort of thing. It's important for Kyle and I as well. But what can I do before we get up to that crisis point? And suicide is not just a veteran problem; it's a person problem. Kyle often says, if we fall off a stage and break our arm, we go to the doctor and we get the arm fixed. So why are we not working on our own, constant mental health? So I'm going to pause there. Lisa, let you and Kyle have some closing remarks, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Yeah, so just there are a couple of themes of what we've talked about, and most importantly is exactly what you just said, Lewis. Don't wait until your mental health is in crisis to address it. There's so much you can do to avoid getting to that point, and it makes life more enjoyable. So why not?
Yeah, Kyle?
Yeah, absolutely. And Lewis, I love that you put this slide in there, but the suicide just isn't just a veteran problem. I almost wish I would, talk about just mental health isn't just a topic for veterans, and it's, post-traumatic stress isn't, just for the veteran population as well. So maybe all the signs I could probably fill out with something related to the mental health space. But point being is that, we find ourselves in a time where, there's challenges in our daily lives, regardless of the background, where you are today is, the person you are who's being affected by, COVID, isolation, different stressors and challenges that you're facing, professionally, personally, whatever it may be. And so, having, today's discussion in your head is, an excellent, resource, not only for yourself, but for the people around you. I think I mentioned it a couple of times, it's really the people around me who recognize that I needed help back in the day for post-traumatic stress, and the people that tell me I need to sleep a little bit more and kick the Reese's cups. But point being is that these are all good skills to have, not only for ourselves but for the people we care about as well.
Yeah, so I want to open it up for questions now.
First one's the hardest.
Does the panel have suggestions on how to approach someone in our lives that may be struggling with the topics covered today? Lisa.
Yeah, so any way that you approach it is going to be better than not approaching it. Sometimes we're afraid to talk to people who we think are struggling, and what's the worst that's going to happen? And never be afraid to ask someone if they're feeling suicidal. It's not like you're going to plant that idea in their mind. If you have a concern, come right out and ask them and encourage them to get help, and make sure that they're not alone until they do get help if they say that they are suicidal. But just don't be afraid to talk. People will welcome that more often than not.
Yeah, questions to Kyle. Kyle, the stress that you have today, is it any different than you had when you were in Afghanistan?
Yeah, I almost feel like it's more of a challenge today, or the stress weighs heavier today. So just everyday life that we all, go through. I mean, it's tough. There's people that depend on you. There's, challenges you face with family, illness, all of those things. To me, I find I have to stay on my routine, my physical exercise routine, practicing mindfulness. I have to do pretty much everything just to be able to, make sure I'm on an even keel, if you will, or able to tackle each day the best I can. The stress of Afghanistan is different. Obviously you're in a war zone, you know what your mission is, and what you're there to do, but it's also confined to a very specific thing. You're fighting in the war. This is what you're doing. This is your entire world. The people around you, what you're there to do, the enemy who's trying to harm you. It's very easy to understand, if you will, at least from my experience. And you go from a thing where hey, this is what we're being shot at from this ridge. This is what we do. This is what the training is. Situation resolved. Go back and continue moving forward. In life, I find there's a lot of things that don't have a solution, or nothing's really that great of an outcome if you're facing it. And so it's a different kind of stress, and I think it's harder. I think it weighs tougher.
Two-part question. This will be the final one, both to Lisa and to Kyle. First part to Kyle is, has the events of the past few weeks impacted your mental well-being or mental wellness more than normal? And the second part of that question is to Lisa. Is that normal? And then how do we overcome those sorts of things?
So absolutely. But for me, I had a little bit different experience post Afghanistan until today. I fought in a part of Afghanistan that we, worked every day to push the border just a little bit back, expand our area of presence for the Afghan people. But it wasn't long after we redeployed in 2008 or so that the replacing unit command had decided to withdraw back and consolidate forces. So all of the land that we fought for and bled for and lost lives in the process of, we had to surrender that back to the enemy relatively quickly. So for me, I kind of already had that moment about 10 years ago. But I think the biggest challenge for me is understanding how it affects so many people in so many different ways, and then trying to be not only someone my friends can talk to, but then proactively reaching out and saying, hey, like, how are you feeling? This is a tough time for not only those that have served, but families of those who have served, and then especially our Gold Star family members. It's a tough time, and just being able to help support those people. It's what I've been focusing my time on.
Lisa?
Yeah, so the question was, is it normal? Yeah, it's normal. It's part of being human. We carry around a lot of emotional experiences that easily get revived, and when they're difficult emotions, it's a struggle. But the flip side of that is that that's what makes being human so rich. But what to do about it, I would say try not to get stuck in it, and try to channel those feelings into helping, as Kyle's doing. If you're finding that you're getting stuck, then maybe you actually need some help to get out of that and to channel it into a more positive direction.
Yeah. Thank you, Lisa. And final comment for you. If someone is in a situation where they want to reach out for help, whether it's either building some of the routines that we talked about through their, in their company or for themselves, or something more involved, where's the place to turn?
So yeah, you can have a look at our website, which is yourmindworks.com. And through the website, there's a lot of interesting content on there. And there are also links to reach out for help if you need that.
Well, Courtney, and the group who are here, thank you for being part of this today. We appreciate the hour that you spent with us. We hope there's some things that have spurred some thought in your own mental wellness. Courtney, feel free to share my email address if anybody would like to connect or a referral to resources. We're happy to do that. But with that, I have nothing else. Kyle and Lisa, thanks for your input. Courtney, thank you for arranging this. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.